All future proceeds from this video will be donated to Ukraine through officially recommended channels. So please subscribe. Thank you. Now, President Zelenskyy. Let me present ourselves. I am Mikhail Zygar. With me are Tikhon Zuzadiyadko, editor of Television Do, Ivan Kolpakov, editor of Meduza, Vladimir Solovyov, former correspondent of Kommersant. We also have the virtual presence of the winner of Nobel Peace Prize, Dmitry Muratov. He gave us his questions. We will ask questions one by one order, and we start with Dmitry Muratov. Respected Mr. President, I think you know the joke that the letters V and S, widely used in Russia nowadays, are in fact your initials.
Которые сейчас широко используются в России, означают ваши инициалы.
Do you think that the final solution of the problem of Zelenskyy is the main reason for the invasion of Ukraine? I don't hear you well. It gets noisy here, you know.
Слышу не очень хорошо, тут у нас громко бывает.
I heard many such opinions that getting rid of me was planned. There were a few attempts by some people it spoke. I may not hear exactly, but I understood the sense. I take it very calmly.
Я могу не дослышать, но смысл любого слова я хорошо понимаю. Вот. По поводу устранения того или иного, значит, я очень спокойно к этому отношусь.
There were some groups wanting to get rid of me politically, starting with the group of Medvedchuk,
Это значит была группа всякая вот эта вот Медведчуков.
buddies of the current Russian head. They found political forms of eliminating me in local elections.
Находили политические форматы устранения, как
A lot of propaganda.
очень много пропаганды.
The weakening of local power. This was the main attempt after my victory in the presidential elections, and that of the majority party.
Партии сегодня монобольшинства. В общем, они понимали, что
They understood that the Russian politics are losing their strong possibility to influence the Ukrainian politics.
российской политики на украинскую политику.
So they chose a different tactics to win in the regions.
Они избрали другую тактику, тактика победы в регионах. Почему?
Why? Because regional. I do not know how it was with you, but we had a majority system, and there were the financial and political groups.
Что было у нас? У нас на местах долгое время существовала мажоритарная система, а на местах, как правило, да, вот в выборах в парламент, а на местах, как правило, были те или иные группы финансовые, политические, такие, скажем так, закрепленные.
I would call them buried. They had influence on the local law enforcement organs, on politics, on everything. And so in the normal, democratic meaning of the word, you may control the central power and have some prerogatives given to you by the nation in free and fair elections. But on the local level, you may not solve anything. You can make reforms that do not reach the local level. It is a political calendar. You have a whole lot of ideas of ambitions, a huge energy, and a young team with brains. But you do not reach the regions, because over there it is blocked. They chose a tactic. Of having a huge influence in the regions. We know that they tried to buy the franchises of other parties on local level. There is a lot of money. And as far as I know, Russia, one way or another, always helped this political structure. We saw how in the councils on the level of regions or oblast they would come up with different ultimatums. Block someone here, get rid of the representative of the governing party, make reforms impossible.
Где-то, в общем, вводить те или иные значит, аспекты, что та или иная реформа не должна действовать так, как
saying we will solve it between us here locally.
сами разберемся. Такие вещи
The idea was to move from local councils to the parliamentary elections. It happened. They would do anything they could.
Они очень хотели, объединялись даже.
They would unite the left with the right in order to make the process unworkable. Why did they do it? Well, now we move to the realm of suppositions or realities of physical elimination. Because when the situation in the country is unstable economically, everything falls. Chaos in the Supreme Council. As you may well know, we have democracy in Ukraine strikes start.
Хаос в Верховной Раде. У нас демократия в Украине, вам это хорошо известно. У нас там какие-то забастовки.
And there go the local councils, the land reforms, bank system reforms, the administrations of water resources, many things that now, due to the war, were put on hold.
Очень много вещей сделали, которые, к сожалению, сейчас в силу войны отложены.
On a shelf that we do not even see in our room. But all this, of course, will come. And this destabilization was needed so that the regional governability would lead to destroy the majority.
Имея крепкую региональную силовую управляемость, перейти к тому, чтобы партии раскололи монобольшинство.
Chaos in economy and unstable political spirit in Ukraine and in the society would lead to the escalation coming from the Russian Federation and the current Russian president.
Российской Федерации и правление сегодняшнего президента Российской Федерации.
Simply they could then occupy our country so much faster. It was definitely part of the plan. We know it not so much from the data of intelligence of other countries, but from our own intelligence services and our understanding of the culture and the spirit of how the Ukrainian politics are treated. The fact that the independence of Ukraine is not considered as a fact is our common tragedy of you and us. Since we speak above all about nations, only then about authorities. This is the tragedy, not accepting use as an independent state, but rather perceiving us as some product, as some part of something.
Не восприятие этого, а именно восприятие чего-то, какого-то продукта.
Of some big organism at the head of which the current president of Russia sees himself. We are not some kind of atavism.
Ну вот, собственно, мы не считаем себя атавизмом, считаем...
We are an independent state with a long and deep history and passion. Of our the moral unity, I need not speak. We show it every day.
Как это на самом деле. Вот, соответственно, я закончу эту мысль.
I will finish this idea, perhaps too long. Excuse me, the destabilization did not succeed.
Эта дестабилизация не прошла.
Neither what the political groups here had in mind.
Внутри нашей страны, тех групп политических, про которые я вам сказал, и в планах внешних...
Nor in the outside plans, namely of Russia. The escalation was part of these plans. I do not know what was reported to the high authorities, but I think that they reported that we wait you here with flowers and smiles, that the situation is very bad, that the current president and party have no support. Perhaps. I am convinced 999%. Otherwise, he would not say so. And then, seeing that it is not going as was planned,
лед тронулся, господа. Вот. И тогда уже, когда увидев, что...
So the plan was to neutralize those who stabilize the situation in the authorities.
Максимально нейтрализовать тех, кто стабилизирует ситуацию во власти. А когда...
And during war, who can guarantee this stability? Only the president, because there is martial law, according to the laws and prerogatives decided by the independent Ukraine. Tikhon Zadadko, I would like to ask about current events, about the war. We see that recently the worst hotspot is Mariupol. We know that the town is practically totally destroyed. that there is a humanitarian catastrophe that hits the population of Mariupol. But who controls now the town? We are getting contradictory signs. Yes, there is no contradiction. The information chaos is understandable. And why it was created, the reality is as follows. The city is blocked by the Russian forces, all entries and exits from the town. The port is mined. There is total humanitarian catastrophe inside the town because it is impossible to bring supplies of food, drugs, and water. Russians shoot at the humanitarian trucks, at convoys. They kill the drivers. I do not know what happens to the supplies. Many were sent back to Zaporozhye and Berdyansk. The situation is difficult there. In the last 100 minutes, 120 constant shooting. Some agreement were achieved about the evacuation. The lifting of the blockade when civilians from Mariupol would go towards Ukraine. Forced transport of people towards not our but opposite direction into the occupied territory also happens. According to our information, more than 2,000 children were taken, i.e. stolen, because we do not know the exact location of all these children.
Потому что их неизвестно нам точные локации всех этих детей, они там возятся как с родителями.
Some are with parents, some without. This is a catastrophe. I cannot even describe it. They keep them as souls for an exchange fund. There are no civilized words, only emotional expressions come to me mind, unfortunately.
Нет там культурных достаточно там слов, только эмоциональные буквы.
But since we are frank with you and I,
так как мы с вами откровенны, я в принципе всегда.
In principle, always try to be frank. Our troops are inside Mariupol. This explains why there is informational chaos. Because Russian troops went where they could, and in some part of the town they did not penetrate. Because our boys refused to go out when they appealed to them. Not only that, the families of these guys approached me. I talk to these guys every second day or so. I definitely get in touch. I try to find time for this. It is important to me. I tell them I understand everything. Guys, we will definitely come back, but if you feel that you need to stay. If you feel it's the right thing to do and you can survive, then do it. I understand what it looks like for the military. Do it. I left the decision to them. They said, we can't leave. There were wounded people here. We will not abandon the wounded. We will not leave the dead. Please understand, there were corpses lying on the roads, on the pavements in the town. There are corpses lying around. No one is picking them up, corpses of Russian soldiers and Ukrainian citizens. All of them. They are crowds, not crowds. Excuse me. But I can't say heaps about people. I can't find the right Russian word. I just don't know. Yes. Piles. Yes. You see, it looks scary. But our military is not ready to leave even dead soldiers. To go out and somewhere, excuse me. I don't want to say so, to bury them as if they were. I prefer not say somewhere. To bury like rubbish. It concerns not barely the officers, but all Russian dead. So they protect the town, protect the wounded, protect the dead whom they want to bury. We asked them, but they wouldn't let us take out the corpses or the wounded. I don't know if they are taking corpses of the Russian soldiers in the direction where they take our children. I do not know. The information is confusing, vague in terms of truth and justice, so we cannot confirm. But everything else you've heard is true. Zygar, what about the conflicting information, including the casualties?
То, что касается противоречивых сведений, в том числе о количестве погибших, особенно
Especially different estimates from the Russian and Ukrainian sides concerning the number of Russian casualties.
российских солдат.
By such different estimates, what is happening to the bodies of Russian soldiers who were killed? Are they being taken home? Are they being buried locally? Do you have any estimates or lists of these dead? Lists are being compiled. Our military guys compiled lists. All those who were captured, all the lists are there, the data is there. I don't know whether everyone is interested in them. Politicians, I think, are not very interested, but for their parents, of course, it's just hopeless or can't live like this. One has to understand the information. Zygar, will you publish those lists or share them? I am sorry to say it, but I think the Russian side has all the lists. Our military approached them about the exchange, just as the Russian side approached the Ukrainian side. And when one talks about any exchange, the lists are shown. We do not keep secret whom we have as prisoners of war, well, in most cases. That is why lists were handed over. The military asked me to decide. I said, the first proposal was, let's exchange everybody for everybody. There was no need to act according to some generally accepted canon say. Let's wait until the end of the war, or we should take more POWs. I don't understand why we would need it. I believe there is an agreement to swap everyone for everyone. Today there are so many of them, let's swap them for so many. No matter. Don't count 10 for 10, 11 for 11. Oh wait, we all grab some more. This is what they are doing to the civilians now. This is just disgusting. I said, if they steal children, then we will do everything in the end. There will be no negotiations, nothing. We'll walk away from everything. We won't negotiate anything with them. Nothing will end. Nobody will be exchanged. This bestiality I saw it in the Minsk process. We agreed with Putin in 2019 that we would swap everyone for everyone, meaning pause from the conflict in Donbass in the next 2 months. We met in December. We had a good exchange, 110 people, I think. Their side still had a list. They could not say who are their people in our prisons, etc. We handed over our lists, gave a copy to the old. There were also questions about the Crimean goings. I gave the list of them too, just in case. We gave the lists to the Turks, the Germans, the French and the Russians. We handed them all over to the OSS on purpose, to avoid later questions. It was all over. They did not change anyone for us. The swap of all for all did not work then. There you go. That's why this is the story with the exchanges now. The information on the exchange fund, we have nothing to hide. I do not know how public it is. I honestly haven't asked yet. Do they need it? I am just not sure that they need these lists. Because as soon as these guys, Russian soldiers, show up, you can see they are just kids, especially these ones, born in 2003-2004. I'm generally surprised some of us lived part of our lives already in 2003-2004. And they were born then.
2003-2004. Там люди такого года рождения.
I think that is why they do not want to show what is with the bodies.
Что с трупами. Я не совсем понимаю, как они их...
We want to hand them over to give them away. We don't want to keep the corpses. You understand.
Мы не хотим держать трупы, вы же это прекрасно понимаете. Мы хотим, чтобы...
We want them to leave. At first they refused, then something else. Then they proposed us some sacks. It all looks like I don't know. We all probably had some moment when people pass away, not even close people.
Уходили люди, даже не близкие люди.
Or family look, even when a dog or a cat dies. You don't do that. It's rubbish bags. I don't understand what people think.
Я не понимаю вообще, честно, что себе...
What the parents of these kids think. I don't get it. I'd set fire to anything I could. Frankly, I used to be that kind of person even before I was president. In our country, people would beat up someone if they brought something in a sack or didn't want to take it away, or they hid it. This I am telling you as a president of the country which is at war with Russian soldiers who came here and we hate them. What they are doing. But look well, in hatred it's war. But it's not cattle. It's not cattle. And that's why it's also very why is that scary. I'll tell you.
Почему это страшно все? А я вам скажу, потому что...
It's scary because when you treat your own people like this,
Когда отношение такое к своим,
then what attitude to everybody else? And we are definitely not friendly to the Russian government. That is what is frightening. I think it is barbarity. And all this will end badly. For Ukraine, we understand in the name of what? But for you, we don't want to offend you. I'm sorry if I say you. I just don't know how else to say it. I tell it like it is. What is happening in your country in Russia? I do not understand. It is a tragedy. Yes, a tragedy. It affects us. That's why I said so. And there are a lot of children. I don't know they took an oath or made promises. There are a lot of children who didn't, to know where they were going. Many of them say stupidities and lie at first, not knowing what will happen to them. Once they see that they retreated normally as much as possible. Because it's war, and things happen, many are shocked. They make phone calls to parents, take us away. And how they abandon tanks. A huge number of intercepts of phone calls. And they say so and so. I shot myself in the leg today, and Pasha broke himself something else. Look, a column of 200 tanks is coming. Ours blew up 30. The column is no more. 70 tanks are running away. They were not soldiers, they were forced. Sent to the slaughter. That's the way it is. But sadly, back to what the consequences and results are for us. And the result, Mariupol is gone. Just gone. Volnovakha is simply gone. Towns near Kiev in Kiev region are small towns which I think like yours all towns near capital cities are usually small towns. But everybody lives there. Country houses and local population lives there too, and dachas. It doesn't exist. Scorched land. Just scorched earth. Absolutely. It looks well, you've seen the pictures, but you haven't seen everything. We can't even show it all. It's impossible to show, because it's impossible even for our population to show what it looks like. There are simply no houses. There is simply nothing in Volnovakha, no streets, no houses. There is nothing. Mariupol is a big city, 500,000. Can you imagine a city of 500,000 people? 90% of the buildings are hit, gone. Burned, they are gone. With high-rise buildings, you can at least imagine what was there. And in cities like Volnoveka, there is simply nothing. Absolutely. That is their attitude. They go and just burn it out. I don't even know who has ever been treated like that by the Russian army. I have never seen. Maybe I was a very young man then and don't remember the Chechen war footage so well. It was terrible there, but there. I am sorry, it is simply impossible to compare these volumes. Over there have been 2 wars. Not only that. I will tell you that it is impossible to compare the volume of what was in 8 years and in 4 weeks. It is impossible to compare. We were told that in Donbass from our side or in the temporarily occupied territories this is nothing, just so you understand, compared to what we have going on here now. Just nothing. Yesterday, for some reason, 6 missiles landed in Lviv. 6 cruise missiles. Well, for some reason. They were looking for something paramilitary. They hit various oil warehouses. They re-aware that it's sowing season now. What does it have to do with, even if they tell some militarized stories, what does it have to do with the sowing season? Ukraine feeds part of Europe, half of the Arab world. How are on good terms with the Arabs, the Russian Federation itself. Turkey has no sunflower oil, no grain, nothing. Moreover, it is even impossible to say why this is true. They did not let export the grain to all these countries. They were not allowed to take it out. Ivan Kolpakov, Mr. President, how has your personal attitude towards Russians changed since 24 February 2022?
Господин президент, как с 24 февраля 2022 года изменилось ваше личное отношение к...
Do you still have people in Russia whose opinions still matter to you?
Люди, чье мнение для вас по-прежнему значимо.
And the hardest question of all, do you think Ukrainians and Russians will ever be able to normalize their relations? The first one. Despite the fact that I am the president and I should be a rather pragmatic person, the attitude has worsened after the 24th. It has worsened very much. The emotional component of it towards the Russian Federation. To the people has been lost, even to the people. I understand with me mind that there are many Russians who support Ukraine. I am grateful to them, because without the word-of-mouth radio, without the work of honest journalism, without the inner potential of a Russian person who is for justice and for Ukraine, and yes, let him be first of all. For himself, which means he will be for Ukraine in this situation. Because a war on our territory will not do this Russian man any good if he is aware of it. The whole population's attitude has deteriorated. There is no way back. I will tell you, and you will probably understand now. In 2014, when it all started, let's say Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine or Russian-speaking families, if you like, had hoped that it would end any moment.
испытывали надежду, что это вот сейчас-то закончится.
A lot of things happened, misunderstandings. And for years it was building up, and so on some of these families they believed that everything is still possible. Something is possible somehow. Just like I am telling you. Just like this, something is possible. Without specifics, because there was a war. And there was a precise understanding that something was needed when I became president. I understood that we needed to do everything to stop the war. We needed to fight propaganda by our own example, to show what you want to change the country, the relationship with your neighbors. To restore everything back to what it was before 2014, to find common ground, to sit down at the negotiating table. Now, during this month, a global cultural, historical rupture has taken place. This isn't just a war. I think everything's much worse. There's some people left in Russia, well, for one, you and I are talking now. And there's people who left Russia. I'm not saying I support their departure. It's their own decision. There's cultural workers, artists, whom it's possible to convince with talking points. Well, they all find those themselves. They read the portion of the nation who read. They all figure it out. But I feel deeply disappointed that many citizens support this war in Russia for many reasons. I don't even want to say it's brainwashing. On the one hand, yes, but on the other, propaganda is also an excuse, if we be honest. There's no way not to notice the war ongoing for so many years. Maybe for a week. Yes, we were told something other than what happened. But this isn't even like 9/11 in the States, which everyone saw, or the house explosions in Moscow. This isn't like that. This isn't one move. It's 8 years. It's long. In 8 years, people finish school. You can grow up, get educated, learn the subject. You can become a professional in any discipline. I'd become a journalist or an investigator. I'd find this out myself. I did it if I really wanted to understand what to do with this. But if I don't want to, then it's easier for me to support the existing regime. And that's the most horrifying disappointment. A disappointment that's become hate between peoples. I can't say how to bring it back. I can't say if it will ever come back. I'm not an oracle. I'll put it this way. I'll be honest. Each family will feel a loss. They might be different: an exile, an injury, a child. Someone's moved away, went to Poland, Bulgaria, could find work or could. Doesn't matter. Got scared, or their child got scared of the explosions. Everyone's family will feel distress. Of course not years of occupation. We're not done yet. But the technology is different. The occupation is more brutal because it's more intensive. It's more intensive. I don't even want to compare it to fascism. But you understand how different occupations work. You know how they worked in different wars. It's not profitable to destroy cities, because before you occupied it, someone lived there. Your underwear will have to be washed there. Soldier, you restationed there, someone has to do it. The washing, cleaning, cooking, the living. In France, the cinemas were operational. Here, it's not like that at all. Here, they come in. If the local government doesn't give in, they re-stolen. If people start protesting, it all gets burned down. Mr. Zelenskyy, I wanted to quickly clarify. Do you support the boycott of Russia's cultural figures? We all heard what happened with Sergei Loznitsa, who came out against the boycott and was expelled from the Ukrainian Film Academy. What do you think? I think that, for example, it's not right to boycott Loznitsa. He's an artist. But I've just heard things I might not know. I don't even know the reasons for his expulsion. I feel like that must be a mistake. I don't know. But he's an artist who's pro-Ukraine, from what I know. He's pro-justice. Pro-Ukraine doesn't mean it has to be delivered in Ukrainian. You understand, it's not like that here. That's a filter bubble within which citizens live in Russia. That's what they retold. I'm talking calmly to you, and when in Ukraine someone speaks to me in Russian, I also switch.
Спокойно говорю с вами, и когда со мной кто-то переходит, со мной говорит по-русски, в Украине я перехожу на русский язык.
I am the president. I feel like if the president behaves a certain way, and people support him, you can assume people feel fine with their behavior. But the hate toward everything Russian will keep growing, without a doubt. Sorry, I'll give a longer answer to follow my thought. I'm a bit out of order today. Didn't sleep well. I answered you about Loznitsa, now about language. The worst damage to the Russian language came from Vladimir Putin. It's irreversible. Of course, people will be embarrassed to speak Russian in some circles outside Russia.
Говорить в каких-то обществах иногда по-русски. Так и будет. Это такое происходило.
That's happened after wars with clearly defined aggressors.
В которой, результатом которой был признан конкретный агрессор, да, в мире. Вот и все. Поэтому
Putin definitely made it irreversible, at least for many years. Here, in these cities, if the Russian-speaking families ever saw a threat,
вот эти вот города, как я вам сказал, русскоязычные семьи, и даже если видели какую-то нить,
but it's those exact cities and families that have been erased.
Именно вот эти семьи, именно они дважды
They escaped twice. In 2014, when it all started, we moved everyone to Mariupol, the universities. Colleges, schools, sport teams people moved. Where? People believed that the war would end soon, they'd return. People in towns near the temporarily occupied ones. Can you imagine? They had two migrations, which ends now in death. They reblockaded there. Who couldn't leave? So tell me, how is it possible to feel about any history connected to Russian culture or Russians? It's a very difficult question. So I'm afraid this will last a long time. And about whether to boycott athletes. Look, I don't think you can feel the pain we're in.
Ты не можешь ощутить эту боль, в которой мы. Но ты должен хотя бы...
So you should yourself feel at least some discomfort. Then you will be able to understand you're not like everyone else.
Что ты не такой, как все.
That your government made you an outcast. So the international boycott of Russian athletes. who aren't involved in politics is the right decision, because unfortunately they are involved. They might not fully feel it themselves, but they have to understand that they are an instrument for the country's international image. And if there's cultural isolation of those who remain there, of course not of those who left. Cultural workers left the country and moved abroad. Nobody will say anything. That's their right. They should live, work, develop. But to say none of them are even a little to blame wouldn't be right, because if a person has never used their voice, not even once, not even one social media post, one protest, you don't have to set a car on fire or shoot anybody. It's not if you didn't kill your king, then you are not our friend. No, just some support. Just to say, I can't go on like this. I don't want this. I want my voice to be heard. Even if one person hears me, that's still one more person. Phrases like, nobody will hear this, it won't help, don't work. They re unjust. So the boycott, so that they understand, when people are dying there, you should at least be uncomfortable. Mr. President, I'd like to move from the humanitarian to the diplomatic, because the peace talks are happening. They started pretty quickly, but we only hear of progress. For example, from President Erdogan of Turkey, who said there are 6 discussion points for these talks and that there's progress on 4 points. One's on Ukraine's membership in NATO, demilitarization, security guarantees, protection of the Russian language, but no progress yet on Donbass or Crimea. Could you please explain where things are actually moving and expand on your idea of the referendum? Because it's unclear how, even after reaching any compromises, a country at war or that's just out of war could hold a referendum. Okay. First, the discussion points. The initial ultimatum. And the first document was an ultimatum from Russia. Wasn't even on paper. It was a public ultimatum.
Я бы не назвал ее даже бумажный ультиматум. Это был публичный ультиматум, насколько мне известно, где-то, как обычно.
It leaked into the information field. It had those discussion points. They were more or less the same, though they also mentioned demilitarization, denazification, lots of phrases. We don't see this as anything other than Russia's renewal splash into the information field, to look like it's doing or deciding something. We got used to this in the Minsk negotiations. They always did this when dragging out the process. That meant they wanted to occupy us quickly, to show they've done it. You know, we found the soldiers' ceremonial uniforms. I'm not sure if you knew this or not, but it's a bit funny, or would be if it wasn't so tragic. How they prepared for an independence parade on Maidan with tanks on day 3 or 4. This is just a splash. Turkey's reaction isn't quite correct. President Erdogan and I talked about this. There's nuance in the translation of his statement and nuance in the rhetoric. First, look, we do not discuss denazification and demilitarization. We will not sit at the table if that is what's being discussed. Those are incomprehensible to me. Off-screen, So that's not being discussed at the talks. We do not discuss these at all. The Russian side asked, at the first meeting in Belarus I agreed to, because AV long said we should have talked even before the war. I'm not against these talks, as long as there's a result. The Russian side sees a victory in this meeting giving some kind of authority to Alexander Lukashenko. Sure, if we can finish the war and this makes Mr. Lukashenko feel like the master of his house again, he's welcome to it. I honestly don't care. That's the decision of Belarusians, definitely not ours. So we agreed, if it was going to be a substantive meeting. The meeting happened. I wouldn't call it substantive. Our side said we will not have those phrases there. We have no interest in those discussion points. As for protection of the Russian language, I am not sure if they conveyed all my arguments. I said that every additional day of war will put into question the context of Russian as a language. The people themselves will not want it. They will not want to read, watch movies, or even speak.
Люди этого не будут хотеть. Люди не будут хотеть читать, смотреть кино, говорить.
I am trying to explain what sensations this leads to, even if it's something you used to enjoy. If it gets to be too much, you simply get sick of it. That overdose is happening to us now. And this kind of love for the language has been passed on to us with blood. In my opinion, this really is a serious issue. If we talk about the Russian language, my opinion was that we should simply wrap up this ongoing discussion about the languages. Everyone in our country speaks the language they prefer. There are more than 100 nationalities living here. So, our response was that all it takes is mirror respect. An agreement on mirror respect for the history and language with all our neighbors. I accept this. I fully do. And I am sure our people will too if they want to. Because there will definitely be a vote on this among the elected officials. So, what does that mean? We must stop playing around as Hungarians do, for example, although less than Russians. We must stop playing around with the concept of closing certain schools. If you want a Russian school, if someone wants to study in Russian, go ahead and open a private one, but with the condition. You open one here, we open one in your country. If we publish something here, it means we publish something there too. This is your language, the state language of the Russian Federation. And to make things fair, you should equally respect us and the Ukrainian state language. That's it. Do not say that it is some kind of a sub-language or a language of illiterate people. I am willing to argue with those who say this, to talk to any Russian politician about the amount of literature they've read and so on. Personally, tete-a-tete, to communicate and to do it in Russian, and then try and talk to them in Ukrainian as well. I apologize. If I understand correctly, you've just brushed off the table at least 3 points of those that had been voiced as being negotiated. Demilitarization is not under discussion. Denazification, whatever that means, is not under discussion. The Russian language is not being discussed either, so what is being discussed then? The Russian language is being discussed, as I told you. Respect for the languages of neighboring peoples. I am interested in such an agreement. I want to sign it with all neighboring countries. I am interested in Russia, Hungary, Poland. We have many different historical issues. Romania and so on, we have many different issues, many minorities and nationalities. And this agreement will be sufficient to provide respect for foreign languages within our country. The issue of language, I am sure, will go off the agenda, because it will be resolved by such an agreement. The fourth issue is the guarantees of security and neutrality, the non-nuclear status of our state. We are prepared to go through with it. This is the most important point. This was the #1 point of principle for the Russian Federation, as far as I remember. And as I recall, this is what they started the war over. Somewhere along the way they began to add points to ultimatums. But originally, they said that NATO was expanding. And while Ukraine had been non-aligned before, such a status was in fact enshrined in the constitution of Ukraine. They claim we have decided to join some organization. We do not agree with that plan, they said, and this breaches our long-term agreements with the West. Consequently, this is the main issue, and because of it we are protecting our security, the Russian Federation said. Thus, this point, the matter of security guarantees for Ukraine, and as they claim also for themselves, is clear to me, and it is being discussed. It has been thoroughly worked on. But I am interested in making sure it does not become another piece of paper a la the Budapest Memorandum. Thus, we are keen on turning this paper into a serious agreement to be signed, and this brings me back to referendum to be signed by all the guarantors of this security. It must then be ratified by the parliaments of the guarantor countries. This is condition number 2. And a referendum is to be held in Ukraine. Why? Because we have a law on referendums. We have adopted this law. Any changes of this or that state status and security guarantees require neutral status, require constitutional changes. Do you see what I mean? Constitutional changes. These requires 2 sessions. When our guys met with the Russian group, they realized they weren't up to speed. That is to put it mildly. What do 2 sessions mean? Without them, the constitution cannot be changed. And 2 sessions take a year. Can you imagine how long this all could take? And I'm not talking about a referendum. I'm talking about constitutional changes in general. A referendum is a faster solution than changing the constitution. That's what I'm talking about. The Russian side requires guarantees that this will happen. Therefore, we need a referendum, because only the people can decide. The referendum will happen within a few months, and changes to the Constitution will take at least a year in accordance with the current legislation. At least a year. Excuse me, but will the refugees who left Ukraine also participate in the referendum? Certainly. Absolutely. We have polling stations abroad. That system works. We have used it previously in the elections, the presidential and parliamentary elections. Everything works everywhere. I don't see any problem with this. But before that moment comes, you will see our people return home. Right now, we have 90% of the population willing to return on the very first day after the shooting stops. Because most of the men have not left anywhere at all. The women and children left. Of course, they all want to come home. Therefore, we must have an agreement with President Putin. Guarantors will not sign anything as long as the troops are here, which is why I believe that the war can be quickly ended. And only Putin and his entourage are dragging it out. Because no guarantor who would do that now. Johnson, Biden, Duda, Erdogan. No one will sit down to talk while there are Russian troops here. Who will sign anything? No one will. It is impossible. So, we should not need to wait for changes in the law. When the Russian side says let's change the law first, and then withdraw the tanks, it makes them look like people who are not very well familiar with the way the political process works in regard to the law. Therefore, we must come to an agreement with the President of the Russian Federation. And in order to do that, he needs to get on his own 2 feet. Get out of wherever he is now to come and meet me anywhere in the world, except, and I firmly believe that would be pointless, except for Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. And the meetings of our delegations demonstrate that, well, these meetings are political and nebulous. These are the 3 conflicting countries today, one way or another. So, if we met and agreed with him, this would be enough. Our agreement can be signed and sealed with blood if need be. This will be enough to start the troop withdrawal process. The troops must be withdrawn, then the guarantors will sign everything. And that's it. The work will begin from there. Further ratification in parliaments, a referendum for several months, and then changes to the constitution. But the referendum implies not only yes as the answer, but also no. If at the referendum the people of Ukraine say we don't want to change the status, we don't want a neutral status, then how will things a referendum is impossible when there are troops in our country? No one will ever, from the point of view of the convention, recognize the results of a referendum if there are troops or armed illegal formations or lawful military formations of another state on the territory of the country without any legal foundation. It's impossible. This is what happened in the Crimea. What kind of a referendum would that be? Who would benefit from it? Let's hold a referendum, and then no one will recognize it. Why? Because there were alien troops on our territory. This is an illegitimate process. It is difficult for me to convey things, and I've mentioned it already, that it is essential that the Russian side start bringing in lawyers. At least people who have a legal education, and not just military or other. Then they will understand. Excuse me. I apologize. I would like to take a different approach here and the question of Donbass. Sorry, I want to finish this. The question of Donbass, which you also asked earlier, Vladimir, was it? Yes. You asked, once again, security guarantees, that is a neutral status. Mutual respect, where the issue of languages is raised, and not only languages, cultures, traditions. They also raise the issue of respect for the church there. Although we should not get into this as a state, the issues of Donbass and Crimea absolutely must be discussed and resolved. Of course, so, I have not brushed off all the points. Allow me one more question about negotiations.
Конечно же, поэтому не все пункты я смахнул.
The other day, the Wall Street Journal wrote that you had allegedly asked President Biden not to impose sanctions on Russian businessman Roman Abramovich. At the same time, various sources say that some kinds of contacts are being made between Ukraine and Russia, allegedly involving people close to Russian President Boris Yeltsin. Allegedly, on the Ukrainian side, a number of prominent cultural figures are taking part in these negotiations. I heard in this context the name of Alexander Rodnyansky, the director. Would you please tell us, are there any parallel talks going on? Are there any other contacts besides the talks we just discussed? Let me tell you this. First, there are a huge number of different contacts being made. You need to understand that. And everything that you are talking about, to some extent, is justified, and it is already working. I'm not sure if these are some kinds of official negotiations. But as soon as the war started, there were many people who wanted to help somehow. You mentioned Alexander Efimovich Rodnyansky. I know he has been in contact with our people and other cultural figures. And just as sanctions began to be introduced, you are naming one big businessman from the Russian Federation, or now he lives somewhere else, I will tell you that all these people fear sanctions. I am sure that it is not great patriotism that drives them. Not sure, maybe, but that's my impression. They've now lost the comfort they've lived in, and it will not be regained in the nearest future. Naturally, they are all looking for a way out. But let me tell you this. All these years, both the Ukrainian and Russian sides, especially businessmen, journalists and cultural figures, have been looking for a way. Yet getting through to the Russian government proved unrealistic. But someone is out there doing something. As for my discussion with Biden, for various reasons, I am not prepared to discuss some of our private conversations now. I know that this businessman you mentioned, he was in a subgroup on behalf of Russian side. I don't know whether his status was official or not, but they were in contact. And, as far as I am aware, he helped in the humanitarian issue of rescuing people and organizing a humanitarian convoy from Mariupol. Everyone tried for Mariupol, and he specifically did too. But, as you know, nothing came of it. Like I said, the humanitarian convoys were shot. The fact is that he and some other businessmen reached out offering help. Some even offered to help restore Ukraine after the war. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, we are ready to allocate money. We are ready to relocate business to Ukraine. We live in England or Switzerland. We want, is it possible, to stay out of the general list of sanctions? We got all that. But we started getting back when our internal sanctions were in effect. Not just Western sanctions. Some people don't want their names to be disclosed, but they say, in fact, we want to help your army, although we are citizens of the Russian Federation. I think that I'll tell you honestly, Ivan Kolpakov, does your office coordinate these negotiations? Do they concentrate around you? V. Zelenskyy, look, I get certain signals, but I wouldn't say that our office coordinates them. I wouldn't say so. They come from all over the world. These signals are either from communities of different kinds, Jewish, Muslim, and so on. Some signals are coming from churches, I'll tell you honestly. And the signals come to our office. The guys have held meetings. Our negotiation team is in Belarus. From them there are quite a lot. So my attitude is quite simple. Any person who is ready today, be them Russian businessmen, no matter of what caliber, who are ready to give money to support the Ukrainian army, we are ready to provide them with security. Provide work afterwards, to develop their business. All those who support us today, those who fight for our country. For sure, we will. A Kolpakov, do you discuss lifting sanctions imposed against these people?
Освобождение от санкций обсуждается.
V. Zelenskyy, look, all I can discuss is what I, as the protector of the Constitution, am capable of doing. Capable and able. I am talking precisely about sanctions within our country. This can be discussed. We can also discuss changing citizenship. If they want to have an economic residence permit, have their own vision of life, develop business after the war, this can be discussed too. But if she, they are ready to help today. It's not necessary to do it publicly. I understand that a person may be afraid of what will happen to his family, and so on, not necessary to do it publicly. For such people, I don't care what nationality they are. It's important who they are inside. That's it. Tikhon Zyadko, the time is running out fast, but we would like to ask a couple of questions about another negotiations. Yesterday, Ukrainian Minister of Defense and Minister of Foreign Affairs met with President of the United States Biden in Warsaw. Two questions about that. The first one, besides political support, are there any real results of these negotiations? First and foremost, I'm talking about the weapon supplies. And the second one, the President of Poland, Mr. Duda, advocates for the entry of NATO peacekeepers into the Ukrainian territory. As we understand, Washington is against any kind of its military involvement on the ground, on Ukrainian soil. Is Biden's position on NATO peacekeepers in Ukraine known? How realistic do you think it is? Volodymyr Zelenskyy, look, I wouldn't say that my take on this is explicit.
Я предлагал
From the very beginning, even understanding all the risks. I suggested then the invasion just started and there were risks for our atomic power stations and other facilities of strategic importance. We suggested that certain peacekeepers should be invited there.
с другими предприятиями, которые имеют стратегическое значение, мы предлагали в том или ином виде туда пригласить присутствие тех...
But we never saw it happening. At this point, that's the case. This whole idea of inviting peacekeepers to Ukraine comes from Poland. So far, I don't understand this suggestion completely. We don't need a frozen conflict on our land. I made it quite clear during the meeting with our Polish colleagues. I know that they proceed with this rhetoric. But fortunately or unfortunately, so far this is our land, the land of our people. And I'm its president. So it's for us to decide if there will be any forces here. As for the meeting of the Minister of Defense and Minister of Foreign Affairs with Secretary of State Blinken, of course, the number one question was the question of arms. I'm not ready to go into details. We explained our position quite assertively. The question is clear enough. You know, the question about controlling the sky. I talk about it publicly and openly. The matter is that it depends on the decision of these two countries. That's why there was a meeting with the United States and Poland. That's it. We were discussing this question. As I've already told you, I'm not ready to tell you the answer. Vladimir Soloviev, Mr. President, I'd like to ask you to comment on the documents released by the Russian Ministry of Defense, dated January 22, signed by Nikolai Balin. According to them, as the Russian side stated, it follows that the armed forces of Ukraine were planning a preventive attack, that they were planning to attack Donbass first. Please explain what these documents are, Zelenskyy. Well, this is fake. There were none. Of course, there were no such plans. Since 2019, I have been telling this, again, to President Putin, and then via all of these channels that you mentioned today and many others, I have been sending this message. We have no intention to take our territories back through military force. I want to make terms with you. What's more, I want to find a format in which we can live for a while. I wanted to live for a while in relationship between Ukraine and Russia. That was before this invasion. So I've been looking for different ways. Believe me, if you name me any country and ask me if I had negotiations with them, if I prepared papers for the Russian Federation, there will hardly be a dozen of countries with which I didn't hold negotiations in order to arrange a meeting, to find out a format with the President of the Russian Federation, despite the fact that some people told me that it was humiliating, that it was impossible to keep talking about this meeting. For me it was humiliating because I understood what the end of it would be. And now we've come to this. Well, and I wanted to comment on this fake. You know, as for Balin v. Soloviev, these documents, do they exist? Zelenskyy, I don't know what this document is. It's hard for me to say. If I had seen it, I would have answered you. The fakeness of all documents about the Ukrainian attack on Donbass is 100%. Besides, it's the National Guard. Isn't it? Former head of the National Guard. Former head Michael Balin. Never ever could this happen. Never ever. To force the way to Donbass. He doesn't even have the authority to do so. As you understand, the National Guard is part of the Interior Ministry. One should understand that the National Guard is under the Interior Ministry. It means that it should be signed by the Minister of the Interior. What does the Minister of the Interior have to do with offensive positions? Complete nonsense. That's number one. Secondly, another document has showed up recently. That woman saw. It was shown, as you already mentioned, by Soloviev, not that one. And that one has shown the document, my so-called Crimea seizure order. I don't know. Did you see this order? You didn't. Well, it's being shown on it everywhere that the documents were found Mikhail Zagar and the orders for the Crimea seizure were suggested v. Zelenskyy. Yes. And I want you to pay attention to one thing. Certainly, I may be Vladimir Alexandrovich, but the document is written in Ukrainian. Pay attention to this. My signature there is written like A. Zelenskyy, but A doesn't exist in Ukrainian spelling. With all due respect, if it's all in Ukrainian, I must. Oh, in Ukrainian it's of O, there is no A. And there are plenty of such things like this balanced document and so on. There are plenty of such things. On Zagar, I'd like to clarify the story about the Russian warship. We all remember v. Zelenskyy, its own 30 Just a moment. A little more, 10 minutes. Yes. I'd like to clarify the story about the Russian warship. We all remember this very powerful story from the first days of war. I believe you awarded posthumously the Ukrainian soldiers who were on Snake Island. And then there was information that they all survived. Tell me what really happened. Are they alive or not? V. Zelenskyy, part of them died. Some were taken prisoner. That's it. All those who were taken prisoner were taken back. There was a prisoner exchange with the Russian Federation. Russia came out with this proposal. We agreed without hesitation. That's all. Those who died, they died an honorable death. Frankly, they are heroes for us. And those guys who survived we took back, and that's it. We had 2 prisoner exchanges. Tea Zadko. Then I'll ask you to clarify another issue. V. Zelenskyy, by all means. Tea Zadko. It's being actively raised by the Russian officials and Russian hosts. If I'm not mistaken, the Daily Mail wrote about it too. If I'm wrong, Volodya Soloviev will correct me. The issue of biolaboratories is being raised all the time in the rhetoric of the Russian authorities. Could you please explain? V. Zelenskyy. Yes. It's just a joke. There is nothing to explain here. Well, we don't have them. Well, we'd love to. But we don't. There are no nuclear weapons. There are no chemical biolaboratories and no chemical weapons. They don't exist. Maybe, if there was a person like him. Back then, when our country agreed to give up our national interests, I can't call it by another name today. When I draw my conclusions, I wouldn't have given it all away like that. Exactly as I wouldn't have given away that thing about like here's a fleet for you, please. Feel free to live and distribute Russian passports in Crimea, and so on. One should be acted honestly, saying, there are lots of Russians here. A lot of our sailors live in Sevastopol. In spite of the fact that it's your sovereign land, let's make an agreement. Let's agree that Ukrainians and Russians will live here. And one should be acted honestly, instead of quietly coming and handing out, and there's this fleet, for which these Russian officials bought our flags. And so, it was outrageous. And the Ukrainian authorities turned a blind eye to that. Absolutely. Rudeness and betrayal. It's betrayal. I mean, it's the territory theft from the Russian side and an absolute betrayal by Ukraine. This is what it was like in the 1990s in relation to Crimea and in relation to its sovereign territory. That's why with these laboratories, look, in fact, we never, you know, are people. I'm sure you all have been here. How could we poison someone with some kind of chemicals? Never would we do that even to our enemies. The philosophy of nuclear disarmament is right and legitimate, and so on. But one can't build their empire on the weaknesses of someone else. It's just impossible. Empires are built on economics, not on intimidation. Ivan Kolpakov, I'd like to ask you one more question. V. Zelenksyy, no problem. I Kolpakov, how would you define the Ukrainian military goal now? How do you imagine it if you do the military victory? V. Zelenskyy, I do. To minimize the number of victims. To shorten the duration of this war. To withdraw the troops of the Russian Federation to the middle ground territories, namely those where they were before February 24, before the incursion. They should go back there. I'm well aware that it's impossible to force Russia to completely liberate the territory. It will lead to the Third World War. I understand everything perfectly, and I am quite aware of it. That's why I call it middle ground. Yes, it's a middle ground. Go back to where to all started, and there we will try to solve the issue of Donbass, the complex issue of Donbass. For me, it's look, I'm not 70 years old. You all see where I'm coming from. I'm not 70 years old. I have time, that's for sure, but I'm not here for long. Because, again, I'm not 70 years old, and a worthy man will come after me. I want to end this war. I don't want hundreds of thousands, Tody. I don't want it. That's why I didn't consider an armed attack neither on Donbass nor on Crimea. Because I am well aware how many thousands of our people would die, and what would be the price of these territories, even if they were reclaimed after all. Nobody knows. Now the Russians have come with all their power, and about 20,000 are already dead. With all their power. And pardon me, but they didn't get into Kiev. They didn't get into Kiev. V. Soloviev, for now, Zelenskyy, for now, right you are. For now they didn't. You must understand that they are unlikely to enter. But if they do, you must understand for sure that they will need 100,000 people. There is no other way to deal with such city, with such people, the living people. Those who didn't leave Kiev are 3 millions. Do you understand what it is? It's just a huge number of people. Soloviev, Mr. President, while we were speaking, we received the news that the head of the owner announced he intends to hold a referendum on becoming part of Russia. I assume that the new authorities will soon follow. What solution or discussion of the Donbass issue could there be? Look, we try to live in a certain space of legitimacy. Right. When someone says something, they must represent something.
Когда кто-то что-то говорит, это же надо, чтобы этот кто-то что-то представлял.
For themselves or some territory. In the legal sense. The law understood by international institutions, not in individual occupied parts. So anyone can say what they want. It is everyone's right if they really are people. It does not matter. We heard signals from these comrades, the sportsmen as we called them, in the 1990s. When I was at university, we called these people sportsmen. It's not the ones who medal it, just that they act as if they regret. Well, that's the kind of athletes in sports trousers. And then they changed their suits and became what they became. But he's in tracksuit trousers underneath that suit and he stays. And in tracksuit trousers and striped t-shirts. So I don't know what they represent there or what they claim. For sure I agree with your rhetoric. It will be followed by other offices of the Russian Federation on the territory of Ukraine. To me this is such a CEO of President Putin. I will probably talk about it with the owner of these people. Not with these comrades, if you don't mind. Zazadko, Mr. President, representatives of your office said that you have survived more than 10 assassination attempts in recent weeks. Can you tell us about this in more detail? What was it, where, when, and how? There is nothing to tell, really. Our security is dealing with these issues and eliminating problematic elements who come here to hunt. There is nothing more to say. Zygar, as we are running out of time, maybe you have some kind of appeal to those Russian citizens or Russians who will be watching our conversation on various channels. What would you say to them? I think the important thing is that all people should understand once again, no matter what. We understand that in Russia as well as among Russian citizens who have left the Russian Federation for good or for a while, it doesn't matter. There is probably a large percentage of people who support the truth. I won't even force them to say. They support Ukraine, they support the truth. Because it is important to sort out the truth for yourself and to dot all the I's. But there is also a large percentage of people who support the policy of the current Russian president. I just want all these parties to analyze the situation more. Those who support the truth and Ukraine, I'd like them to contact their neighbors, their relatives, their loved ones. Because without it, it is impossible to pass beyond this information curtain, which used to be an iron curtain and now it has become an information curtain. It is impossible to tear it down without journalists, cultural people, people of art, writers, actors, teachers who can give knowledge to children. I know that by doing so they take risks. I know, I understand. But nevertheless, it will be impossible to end anything without it. This war will not end. Because the war will not end with us ending military operations defending our territory, and Russia ending its operations here, this will not end the war. You understand. Fences with grenades flying over them do not prevent a war. Something will end, the moment will come. War, you remember Preobrazhensky. Destruction is in the head. So the war will end when everybody is willing to accept that it was a big mistake of the Russian government that led to the catastrophe for the Russian people. And a tragedy between Ukrainian and Russian peoples. And when this becomes clear, only then will it be possible to draw a conclusion as to how long this war will last. So it seems to me that one should think about one's children and grandchildren. There is nothing left to think about for oneself. Today, adults like you and me will not forgive each other anything. I do not believe in this anymore. I just saw how Russians react. I saw the percentage of support for Putin and so on. I mean not him, but his actions. That is not possible. But we have to fight for our children and for our grandchildren. This is a big chance. Because we understand that we will not move from these lands. Neither us nor you, which is only fair. So we should knock on all kinds of doors, unclosed human doors, knock and talk about it, because it is really hard to understand under bombs, under shots, and under this information attack. This is information bombardment. I do not know what was more scary, information bombardment for many, many years or bullets. Both are scary. People should understand it. Try to accept it as a tragedy and try to solve it. Try to solve it. And we don't want peace.
Ну вот, собственно говоря, это вот так. А мы точно хотим мира.
Because if we did not want it, believe me, we would be in the Crimea tomorrow. If we had everything now at the level of war, let's go. We ran hurrah. There's no hurrah. We were beating them on our territory. 1 hour military beats 10 Russian ones. Because they don't understand what they are doing here. That's all. And they know for sure that his wife is somewhere in Poland with a child. Or in Volnovakha. She was crushed yesterday. That is why these people are so strong. Not because they are special, but because we have tragedy, and I am trying to explain it. This is why when Russia says, the documents should say that you will not take Crimea by military means, we will not take it by military means. We pity people, we pity our people, because people will go there and will die. It is just apathy. You have done nothing in these 10 years anyway. I do not mean personally you. What has been done in the Crimea? Have hotels been built like in Dubai or what? What has been brought there? What is there in Donbass? The Aranak could be run. They just hit it with a shell and it stands. And it is impossible to do that, you know. People came with a different ideology. I just don't want to waste time on it. You don't understand what's going on with those floated mines, and no one can understand it, except those people who are there. And with these underground waters, it's a disaster there. Do you think Putin wants this Donbass? He will take all the money from the Russians to restore order there so that people drink clean water. To do something with the floated mines, the closing of those mines. When I became president, I started to study the questions that I had never known in my life. And we were talking about the mines. They were draining money, and coal production was decreasing. Coal production was decreasing. And some miners have to be transferred from one mine to another. Somewhere coal production was working, and somewhere it was necessary to close what is left air coast towns. You cannot just take a mine and float it. You cannot just blow it up. There will be a disaster. Social, humanitarian, ecological. And all this is already there. What to do with all that? Kolpakov, why do you think Vladimir Putin would do this?
Позвольте еще один вопрос.
What is the first thought that comes to your mind that might explain this?
Зачем это Владимиру Путину? У вас какая первая,
Why did it happen?
которая может это объяснить? Какая вам мысль приходит в голову? Почему? Почему это произошло?
It depends. There are many things. What does one thought mean? One thought like does. When he asks questions and someone there answers him. It doesn't work that way with me. He has a multi-vector approach to the question. To the question of Russia. Its place in the world, leadership of Russia, and all those who have departed Russia. Who has a right to be not in Russia. There is a whole history here, you know. Historical approach. Caucasus is the Caucasus. Georgians are Georgians. Moldovans are Moldovans, and Ukraine is Ukraine. Ukraine is dangerous from many points of view. First of all, it is the loss of influence of the Russian language. It has lost several million Russian speakers. It wants to get it all back by force, which will lead to another wave, but let's not talk about that. I don't want to repeat myself. The second one is, of course, the success of Ukraine, because of geopolitics, because of the location. Because of the people, he understands exactly what kind of people are here. Not completely, but still. People understand that such passionate and hard-working nation will go economically fast forward. There are economic risks from Russian point of view. They see it and think, why don't we tree? We were told there that the European Union is not very good in general, but it is. But look what steps they are taking. Besides, the political conjuncture is changing. Young people are coming. That's his inner world. What about him? And what about the future? And people will say, if you can do it there, why not in Russia? There are a lot of reasons why he acts like this. This ambition to want the Soviet Union, but how long does he have to live? Just like any man who is 80 years old. He is not going to live for 50 years. Hence the plans for today's appeasement. Unfortunately, I think his plans are not strategic. Strategy is what will happen in 100 years with the state he has led for a quarter of a century. I am certainly no advisor to the Russian people. But I believe it is strategy. Strategy is what will happen not after me, but what will be after the fifth man like me. What will be in 5 generations? Where will we be? I am interested in what will happen with Ukraine. I am interested as a citizen. For me, children. And if I am not interested, then France, Italy, Switzerland, children there, grandchildren there, Great Britain, and so on. I'm not comparing this to dissidence or forced migration. But when I have such plans to make some dough and go there, Putin has a different approach. He wants what is today to be remembered, that there should be a mausoleum, a monument, a statue, or at least a diploma. Today I see these actions as done for a diploma. I don't even see a monument. And I think it is a mistake. But I believe it is not his mistake alone, a mistake of his entourage. He is in it, you know. Remember, okay, well, I want to compare it to that leader. He's gone now. So what the hell with him? This is why he is so multi-vector and so on. And Abkhazia, and all this, everything will be lost for Russia. But the problem is, how will these people get back together? It was like in Donbass, where they used to teach children in schools for 10 years who we are, what kind of Nazis we are, and then how should we deal with it. That is the problem. This is my answer to the question, what's next? What will happen in 3 or 5 generations? That's the problem. What's the use? We've hammered nails. We've cracked it all. Somebody's gotta do it. It was a good party, guys. But who's gonna clean it up?